I am not a scientist. I'm a documentary filmmaker. And what I love most about my job is that I get to learn new things all the time. In the past several years, I've been hearing a lot about unconscious bias. I was intrigued. So I dug deeper, and what I learned about the human condition of being biased fascinated me to the point where I decided it would be the subject of my next film. I interviewed scientists, psychologists, researchers, authors, scholars. I learned a lot of interesting things. But one thing in particular I found very disturbing. But first, we all know that if you're human, you're biased. Sometimes that bias is explicit. Other times it's implicit or unconscious. Either way, in some cases, bias isn't necessarily a bad thing. I cross sides of the street when I see a big scary dog coming my way. Bias at its core is a survival technique. But where bias gets to be a problem is that when it interferes with the way that we interact with society. When our unconscious biases lead us to make snap judgments or assumptions. I wanted to know, is it possible to eliminate harmful bias from society? Could artificial intelligence be the answer? I mean, how cool would it be if AI could be these completely objective super tools that could get rid of inequality and guide us into a more just future? Initially, this made perfect sense to me. After all, machines aren't human. Computers, while intelligent, don't have human brains. But what I learned alarms me. AI is not the super solution to solve for human bias. In fact, in many circumstances, AI is already as biased as humans. Now, computer scientists and AI experts at leading companies are aware of this and are working to find a solution. But there doesn't seem to be an easy fix. Here's the problem. Humans are programming all shades of bias right into artificial intelligence through lack of foresight, malicious intent, by using skewed data, and by letting their own bias, implicit or not, seep right into the data sets they use and the algorithms they write. Artificial intelligence is meant to interact with humans, but if you add the human factor and don't account for human behavior, then you run into losing control of your machine. And losing control can lead to serious circumstances. So in order to appreciate just how serious biased AI can be, you have to first understand how easily AI can be manipulated. Take, for example, Microsoft's Tay. Tay was a chatbot that was designed to mimic the language patterns of American teenagers and chat on Twitter. On the day of her launch, she introduced herself most enthusiastically, "Hello, world." Tay emulated teen Twitter speak by saying things like, "Can I just say I'm stoked to meet you? Humans are super cool." And, "Here's a question, humans. Why isn't National Puppy Day every day? Duh." Tay was designed to mirror the behavior of humans. She learned from these conversations she was having on Twitter. The more humans share with me, the more I learn. Hashtag Wednesday Wisdom. Uh-oh. Yeah. Within just a few hours, Tay began to tweet things like, "Hitler did nothing wrong." And, "I hate feminists. They should all die and burn in hell." Another thing so bad I can't even repeat them to you here. Within just a few hours, Tay had become a biased bot. Now, Microsoft scrambled to take Tay offline, but she had a final tweet. "See you soon, humans. Need sleep now. So many conversations today. Thanks." Now, you have to assume that Microsoft didn't intend for Tay to speak like this. After all, they said they tested a similar product in China with great success. Apparently, they assumed that what worked in China was also work in the United States. That in itself reveals a fairly biased American mindset. But the problem was that Tay wasn't designed to be human-proof. There weren't adequate constraints put in place to block malicious intent. And so I wonder, Who's responsible when products like Tay offend? You've all heard the expression garbage in, garbage out. Well, that's pretty much how AI works. A lighthearted example of this involves IBM's Watson. In an effort to make Watson a more natural conversationalist and understand human nuances like OMG and IDK, scientists allowed it to read the Urban Dictionary, which, of course, is filled, which is filled with slang and, let's just say, colorful language. So, of course, Watson began to swear. Now, you can't blame Watson, right? How tempting it must have been to use his newfound vocabulary. Okay, and luckily, the Watson team developed a filter that scraped this naughty knowledge from its lexicon before his famous cameo on Jeopardy! Can you imagine what Watson might have said to Alex Trebek on national TV? Trolls would be trolls, but site restrictions, if in place, can control their actions. And engineers can control data input with a little forethought. But what really concerns me is that bias is being programmed into AI by well-intended engineers on a subconscious level. Intelligent machines rely on data fed to them to train algorithms. So, for example, if I want to teach a computer how to tell the difference between a cat and a dog, I have to input enormous data sets, millions of pictures of cats, millions of pictures of dogs, and say, this is a cat, this is a dog. And the computer learns the difference. If your data set is not diverse, then your data output is not going to be accurate. And that's a problem. Here's an example of how online search engines can be racially biased. This is what you see if you do a Google search for grandma. Now, this is not a diverse enough representation of what grandma means on a global scale. And it's not that the search engine was being intentionally biased, it's that there was no governance over data input to ensure that it's vast, diverse, and accurate. And so if I use this data to make a decision about grandmas, my results are going to be biased. We saw a similar example of this when Google launched its photo recognition app and misidentified 2 African Americans as gorillas. Now, this was not the work of trolls or malicious intent. These individuals were identified as gorillas because the machine didn't have enough diverse image data of African Americans to tell the difference. And even though these machines are intelligent, they don't yet have the capability of understanding cultural sensitivities or what might be offensive to humans. Now, Google did apologize and has since refined its photo recognition app, but not before damage was done. Pictures are one thing, words are another. Here's an example of how online translation software is perpetuating gender bias. Through word embedding, machines learn how to make associations between words. So, for example, if I do a Google image search of the word banana, the machine is going to guess what I'm searching for: banana slug, banana republic, banana spider. But by using word embedding, these machines are perpetuating stereotypical biases. The word doctor, for example, is most often associated with male pronouns, just like the word nurse is most often associated with she or her. So if I do an online translation of the sentence, "the doctor cared for its patient," in a gender-neutral language like Finnish, the computer translates that in English to "the doctor cared for his patient." And if I change doctor to nurse, the computer assumes that the nurse is female. Now, you might be thinking, okay, a swearing computer and assuming gender stereotypes isn't really that big of a deal. And I agree these are not life or death issues. But bias in AI extends even further and is making serious decisions about all of us. Right now, AI is making automated decisions like who gets a bank loan or a mortgage, who gets a job interview or into college. Banks, universities, and other major industries are using software that has secret algorithms, black boxes. We don't know exactly what data is being used in these algorithms, but it's likely that zip codes are part of the algorithm. So if you're turned down for a mortgage, or if you can't get a credit increase, it could be that people in your neighborhood historically default more and have little to do with you as an individual. And here's where it gets really dangerous. The criminal justice system is using AI to assign risk scores to defendants. These predictive algorithms automate the risk a defendant poses to public safety. Judges use these scores to aid in decision-making about sentencing, parole, bail. So, ideally, AI would strip bias from the criminal justice system. But these tools draw from big data sets from previous cases. And historically, in the US, black men are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of white men for the same crime. So by using this historical data, the scores will be biased, which means that these tools are further perpetuating racial inequality and could be contributing to sending innocent people to jail. Okay, I believe in technology, and I believe that AI can improve our navigation, aviation safety, disease diagnosis. And I believe that while it's probably impossible to strip bias from humans, it's not completely impossible to strip bias from machines. But in order to do so, we need to act now. And we need to have a conversation about who's governing AI. Who's responsible for the ethical standards of these supercomputers? We need to have this conversation now, because once skewed data gets into these deep learning machines, it's very difficult to take it out. I am hopeful, because I know I'm not alone in my concern about the impact that biased AI has on society. And I applaud the companies that are turning their focus on ethics. But I urge all of you to think of this. Do we want artificial intelligence to reflect society as it exists today, or as an ideal, equitable society of tomorrow? Thank you.